Ambassador Freeman, welcome here. Thank you very much for your time, as always. What did President Trump hope to achieve in China last week, and what, if anything, in your view, did he achieve?
Well, it seems to have been mainly a commercial venture on his part. He bought a lot of Boeing stock and apparently sold 200 aircraft. He had hoped to sell 500. His bet on the Boeing stock probably went the wrong way. He wanted to increase farm sales. It's not clear exactly what that amounted to. The Chinese apparently have agreed to buy $17 billion worth of additional agricultural products over the next 2 years through 2028. But we don't know what that consists of. Of course, as you know, the largest pork producer in the United States is owned by the Chinese, and they do export very much pork from that company. So it was mainly that, and plus ego gratification. The Chinese put on a magnificent show of welcome for any foreign guest. They're about to do that for Vladimir Putin a few days after Donald Trump. And he basked in the pageantry with great pleasure. There was no serious development with regard to any of the major issues of a strategic nature, of the Sino-Japanese relationship, the war in Iran, the war in Gaza, the war in Syria, the war in Ukraine. So it was very much a tactical rather than a strategic development. And of course, the contrast, unfairly, for was made to President Nixon's trip to China in 1972, which I was part of. That was a strategic breakthrough. This was not.
I mean, Trump talked to us about symbols in the way the Chinese culture and the Chinese government greet people. Trump seemed bewildered when he was greeted at the Beijing airport by someone he didn't know and didn't recognize, a vice premier. It's almost as if he was expecting, one would think he would have known in advance who was going to greet him, almost as if he was expecting President Xi. What did this tell you?
Well, some years ago, the Chinese, for many, many decades, the United States essentially blockaded China diplomatically. And we insisted that other countries recognize Taipei in Taiwan as the capital of all of China and regard Beijing as a bogus regime. And so it was really news when a foreign leader turned up in Beijing, and the premier, Zhou Enlai, used to go to the airport to meet them and so on. But as China's...
You're talking about when you were there with President Nixon.
Yeah, I'm talking about the 1970s. But as China's diplomatic relations expanded and flourished, this became too burdensome. They did away with the normal procedure of greeting a head of state or government at the airport with his counterpart. So on one level, this is not a surprise. On the other level, they retain the option, if they wish to demonstrate a contrast, of sending Xi Jinping out to the airport. It would be interesting to see whether he greets Vladimir Putin at the airport, not having greeted Donald Trump. But the welcome is always spectacular. The Chinese, for thousands of years, have built buildings and arranged troops and schoolgirls and boys to impress foreign visitors, and they're just very, very good at it. Almost nobody can match them.
At their first public meeting, President Xi and President Trump, in a large room with, I guess, the diplomatic corps there, the full American delegation, including the 12 business leaders who seem to have gone there for sightseeing, but talk about that in a minute. President Xi, before he even introduced President Trump, lectured him about Taiwan. How do you read that?
Well, that is the core issue in the U.S.-China relationship. It's the only one that could lead to a war. It's not a war because China does not want to use force to end its civil war. It wants to negotiate an end with the authorities in Taiwan and to reincorporate the island on some special basis to be worked out between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. But it has the potential to become a nuclear exchange. And the Chinese are well aware of this. They're matching our nuclear modernization program with their own, building a huge force for deterrent purposes. Of course, they have made so much technological progress that in many respects, their weaponry is more advanced than ours. They have terminally guided ballistic missiles that can strike an aircraft carrier battle group at a distance of about 1,500 miles from China. They have rail guns on some of their ships, which we have not been able to develop. They have hypersonic missiles, which we also have not been able to develop. Their air-to-air missiles on their aircraft outrange ours. They claim they have radar that can detect our stealth aircraft effectively, and so on and so forth. And of course, in civilian areas of science and technology, according to the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which monitors these things, they track 74 different areas of science and technology. And they think China's in the lead in 66, and we're in the lead in 8 still. And our number is going down. So we're dealing with something we've never dealt with before as a country, and that is a competitor, a rival, if you will, who is more advanced in some respects than we are, has 4 times the population, is growing at a more rapid rate, and has lots of problems, but seems very well equipped to deal with them, whereas we are, in a sense, floundering.
Does China need the United States, or does the United States need China?
I think we need each other. You look at the planet-wide problems we confront, whether they're climate change or nuclear proliferation or wars and war and peace on the regional level, or international trade rules or investment rules or energy trade or anything. We have to work together or we both suffer. So I don't think it's a case of one side needing the other more than the other. China has developed in the American-sponsored world order, which we are now tearing down. It seeks to preserve that order. We seek to replace it with something more brutal. And so there are differences between us that are quite fundamental on that. And these come out when we talk about issues like the war in West Asia, the Iran and Lebanon and Palestinian and Syrian and other Yemen wars that Israel is engaged in. The Chinese want peace and stability. We apparently want to support Israeli expansion. And they see the answer to their needs as diplomatic, we see it as military. So we have fundamental differences in how we approach the world. And of course, characteristically, each side thinks it's right and the other side is wrong. And there we are.
Will China, in response to the imposition of sanctions and tariffs, which it seems to be courageous enough just to ignore, decline to sell rare earth minerals to American industry?
It has effectively boycotted much of American industry. Of course, these rare earth minerals are essential for the development of weapon systems, radars, drones, modern aircraft, many military uses. And it's a bit anomalous in the Chinese view that we should, on the one hand, be threatening to go to war with China and declaring that China is the pacing military threat for our armed forces, and on the other hand, demand that they export rare earths to us. Anyway, they have effectively used rare earths, the control of exports of rare earths, to counter our tariffs, our sanctions, our aggressive actions against their economy. And we're in a stalemate. This issue, by the way, must have been discussed in Beijing, but there's no indication whether there was any resolution. And that brings me to a fundamental problem with this summit. And that is, on the American side, unlike the usual use of so-called Sherpas to climb the summit in advance of the leader and prepare the way, there was none of that. So basically, this was an improvised event. A couple of days before it, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, met in South Korea with his Chinese counterpart to figure out what might be accomplished on a concrete commercial level during the visit. That was the last minute. That's not how things are done. There is to be another summit, September 24th. Xi Jinping was invited to the Oval Office on that date. Presumably, he'll go on to address the UN General Assembly after that. But I just hope that professional advice and counsel and hard work by Sherpas prepares that summit so that some of the issues that divide us can be narrowed and even resolved. But that didn't happen in Beijing this time.
Does the Trump administration foreign policy establishment lack the earmarks of professionalism? I mean, you have quite interestingly, and in my view correctly, stated that normally when heads of state meet, it's not to negotiate a deal, it's to ratify a deal that has already been worked out quietly, privately, if you will, by their, whatever you call them, Sherpas, diplomats. But I don't think the president has any diplomats he can trust.
Well, evidently not. As far as I can tell, there are no professionals who have been involved in support of Mr. Witkoff, Mr. Kushner, who are respectively the crony and the son-in-law of the president. Marco Rubio, who has so many jobs that he can't do any of them effectively, has participated in the destruction of much of the professional cadre in the Department of State. The Trump administration is hostile to the civil service. It has heavily politicized the government to the detriment of its competence. We have traditionally had a very competent, very professional government, and sometimes it doesn't deliver, but most of the time it's pretty good. And that reputation is less and less relevant and deserved, I'm afraid.
President Putin, I don't think he's arrived yet, but President Putin is on his way to China. Here's a very interesting statement that he made from the Kremlin before he left. Chris, cut number 3. Interesting ending.
Yes.
Right.
It echoes something else, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, it does. Has the United States, wittingly or unwittingly, pushed Russia and China closer together?
Of course we've done that. And in fact, I suspect one of the main agenda items in that regard during this visit by Vladimir Putin to Beijing will be the conclusion or moving forward of additional pipelines to supply China with gas and petroleum. One of the lessons of the many lessons of the Iran war is that maritime reliance on maritime routes for the supply of energy is iffy. And so there's been a long-term project called the Power of Siberia, which would take gas from Russia and deliver it to China. It's been on hold. I think that will now go ahead. But more important, if you listen to what President Putin just said, He's talking about the United Nations, international law, international organizations. When was the last time you heard of an American president present American foreign policy in those terms? On one level, you can say that this is because the rule of law, the UN Charter, international law, like domestic law, is designed to protect the weak against the strong. And Russia is relatively weak compared to the United States. China, in some respects, is also relatively weak. And so naturally, they rely on the UN Charter and international law to the extent they can. But we have essentially dismissed both the Charter and international law as constraints on our behavior. We do things like kidnap the chief of state and government from Venezuela, subjected to, subjugated, basically. We launch surprise attacks on other countries like Iran with no justification, no effort to provide a legal justification. We carry out blockades with no legal justification. We declare ceasefires in which the other side is expected to cease fire while we continue it, and so forth. And so, so this is really quite striking, especially because of the history. In the early 1950s, when we did not have a relationship with Beijing, it was basically an outlaw in the international system by our choice. It sought to change governments through revolution. It condemned the institutions that we had created after World War II. It is now the strongest defender of those institutions. Why? Because the American-sponsored order was the one in which it rose to wealth and power. It is how China has made a comeback from a couple of bad centuries and is on its way to restoring its traditional role in the global economy, and the world has about a third of the global economy. So the Chinese are strongly supportive of the UN, international law, international organizations, and Vladimir Putin joins them in that. This is very ironic.
Our mutual friend and colleague, Colonel Douglas McGregor, has written a lengthy piece arguing that wealth and power in the world are moving markedly to the east. I'm going to guess you agree with that.
I think that is the case, and it's not just China. India is following along behind China with some faltering steps, but still demonstrably moving forward and upward. And basically, we're confronting a world in which we're no longer the dominant factor. And we better rediscover the merits of diplomacy, because we need help from other people. And we're behaving in a way that guarantees we don't get it. Look at the calls that we've made for support in our contest with Iran, and how many countries have responded to that? Not a single one. We in Israel are completely isolated on that issue. That is not a situation we should welcome. We should be, as we were in the past, able to marshal other countries to aggregate their power to our own, their wealth to our own, to our benefit. That's not what we're doing.
Wow. Ambassador, thank you. A fascinating conversation. I have to ask you a question that might sound a little silly. Several of our chatters have said, can you ask Ambassador Freeman to say something in Mandarin?
Okay. 我叫傅立民，我是退休的外交官。My name is Fu Li Min in Chinese, and I'm a retired Foreign Service officer. I'll just say that I have had a recent experience, which is rather strange. I don't know how I got on Substack, but apparently I did get on it somehow. I must have answered something. And so now I've started to post some things, and I'm getting very interesting information back. For example, I've discovered there are people suing the New York Times for distorting the news on the Middle East, which I had no idea you could do. I'm not sure what their legal theory is, but I think they deserve some support to try to bring the gray lady back in line.
All right, Ambassador, thank you very much. These are some clips. I'm not sure if this is live, Chris, or if this is a video of President Putin's arrival. We don't know yet who met him at the airport, but it was far grander because of the number of people. Here he is meeting his friend, Chinese President Xi, in Beijing just a little while ago. And there is, I guess, Ambassador, the senior members of the Chinese Foreign Ministry meeting the president of Russia.
So a perfection of a relationship that is far more cooperative and mutually productive than the one we have.
Yes. All right. Ambassador, thank you very much. Always a pleasure, my dear man. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. A happy Memorial Day weekend, holiday weekend to you.
Same to you and everyone else.
Thank you. All the best. Coming up later today at 9 o'clock this morning on All of This, Professor John Mearsheimer. At 1:15 this afternoon on All of This, Professor Glenn Deason. At 2 o'clock this afternoon on All of This, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. And at 3 o'clock this afternoon, what will happen if Trump starts bombing again? Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, Judge Napolitano for Judging